Welcome everyone to Postpartum in the Raw, where we are talking to real parents who have real stories, and we're talking about it in a really raw way. So welcome today, Mel Mutterspaugh. How are you?
I'm doing really well, Jacqueline. Thank you for bringing such an important topic out into the world and to more moms. It's pretty amazing. And thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. So if you want to share just a little bit about who you are before we delve into your postpartum story. One of the things we want to do is amplify who people are in the community that are doing any work related to postpartum, or even just moms that are in business. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a clinical herbalist, but I'm also an herbal educator. I host a podcast myself called The Herbalist Path, and I teach moms how to use plants as medicine in the most safe and effective ways. So I have a couple little programs. One's a membership where we talk about like all the things from pregnancy on to emptying the nest. So like colic and breastfeeding and teething and acne and all of those kinds of things. And then some medicine making programs. And yeah, I love it. I used to run an herbal product line and sold a lot of my teas to doulas and midwives and naturopaths that would support their clients and patients with those teas. So yeah, I'm excited to be here.
So let's dig into it.
Yeah.
When you first became pregnant, what, if any, idea did you have about what your postpartum experience might be like? What were you thinking?
You know, I don't think I had any clue at all. I was very adamant about everything being natural and beautiful and perfectly in tune with the earth and Mother Nature. So I thought everything would be lovely in that kind of way, just like I thought my birth would be. And honestly, like when I first found out I got pregnant, I cried because I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't ready for that level in life. But gosh, of course, now I'm so grateful that I have my daughter. But yeah, I remember calling my best friend like, what do I do? And then my partner was like, but I want to love this baby. And so here we are, still loving our baby. Yeah, I don't think I really...
What then, so you had no idea what to expect, but you knew you're like, okay, this is natural, this is beautiful, I'm in tune with all the trees and the grass and all the things, right? What was your actual postpartum experience like?
So can I back up just a moment into the pregnancy part, the end of it, or any of that? So I did get to do a lot of really amazing natural things throughout my pregnancy. I was really blessed that I met Susan McCutcheon, who wrote the Bradley Method book. And she was our labor teacher kind of thing. So she was really, really wonderful. She happened to be like 2 blocks from my apothecary. So it was great. And I had the best midwife, and I had all of the things all set up, ready to go. I had the most beautiful 26 hours of labor in my house, surrounded by nature. I was able to dance naked outside, and then this lovely pool and the right lighting, and everything was so peaceful. And then I got transferred to the hospital, which I was absolutely adamant would not be happening. Not me. I am so natural. And that the hospital was like a good hour plus drive away after 26 hours of laboring, and ended up in an emergency cesarean. And I was, my midwife is also my naturopath today, and she knew like how important this stuff was for me. And she made sure that I had like the doctor in the state of Oregon where I live that had the lowest cesarean rate of all. And I had to have that emergency cesarean. So that, definitely changed plans really quickly.
So what I do know in my experience is that mentally, right, and emotionally, when we have our expectations set, one of the things is that it can negatively impact like your mental health and how you feel and how you navigate postpartum. So that being said, even though you may have had a whole apothecary full of all the things, maybe you got your placenta encapsulated, tincture, the whole nine, how did you actually feel coming out of that birth experience and going into your immediate postpartum?
In regards to like having the cesarean, honestly, I was okay with it. I knew I was in the best of hands. And I knew that my midwife doctor would not make the wrong choices for me. She knew how important this was. I knew she was amazing. And I was really grateful for Western medicine and the fact that it saved my life and my daughter's life. I did have like other traumas that came out of the postpartum thing, more family related, that were pretty rough and hard to get through. But I think I'm really fortunate that I didn't feel guilt and shame over not having that. I mean, there was some of that guilt and shame, like that, like, darn it, I didn't have the actual natural birth. Now I'm not in that club of I had a natural vaginal birth. But I was also like, I'm alive and my daughter is too. And that's amazing. And I still had such a beautiful laboring experience. Like, it was incredible. My midwife, actually, she teaches at the naturopathic college and teaches other upcoming naturopaths and midwives, and she always has interns. And so her interns were at the birth, and their job was to like be there and do all the things. And Susan McCutcheon with the Bradley method did such a good job on educating us with what was going on with the body and standing up for our rights and all of those kinds of things. And the interns were just like, wow, we didn't have to do anything because your partner was all over it and just so there and supportive. And so I was really grateful for all of those things.
I love that. So you mentioned like one of the things about one of the important elements of postpartum is having that community support. And in our country, we kind of lean towards this like nuclear family dynamic. We're not necessarily as communal as human beings as we used to be. Mm-hmm. How were you supported during your postpartum season? Because I know you mentioned there were some iffy things happening with family and that probably contributed to some trauma. Like, could you kind of delve a little bit into family dynamics and how that impacted your postpartum experience?
I would love to. So I'm going to share the story about it. We left for this emergency trip to get a cesarean. And my brother and his wife and his young daughter, who's like now my daughter's bestie, came up to stay with us. And my mom was up there to stay with us. And we had our 2 days in the hospital. And my mom was like, I want to go get my new boyfriend and bring him up here. And we'll be here at your house waiting. Like, we had a nice house where everybody was at. And I was like, the new boyfriend was like 3 weeks of new boyfriend. And I love my mom. She missed out on a lot of her childhood. She was a very young mother. And she's kind of reliving it now, or then. She's doing better now. But it was like she was my teenager. And she wanted this random guy to be at my house the day I brought my first and only child home. And I was like, oh, hell no, that is not happening. And so she got all pissed off and in a tizzy and left my house with her 2 dogs. And I'm still in the hospital at this time. Thankfully, my brother and his wife are at my house resting and nap timing with their daughter. And I had 3 dogs, and we lived out on 10 acres on a dirt road at the end of, like, at the bottom is a big highway. And my mom took her 2 dogs and didn't bother to put my dogs inside of the house. And so one of my dogs, my partner's dog actually, followed her down to the highway and got ran over. And my brother was there. Thankfully, people called him, like, we're about to leave the hospital soon. And my brother took her to the the emergency vet. And we left our unplanned hospital trip to go pick up our dog in the ER, or in the vet. And it was my mom's fault. And her negligence and her immaturity, quite frankly. And it was my partner's dog. And so he was livid at my mom, and we're trying to figure out how we're going to help our dog survive. she was hit on the highway. She did survive. She's actually laying right next to me here almost 10 years later. But it was $8,000 of surgery, and we had to find the money for that. And my partner is so mad at my mom, and we're bringing this child into this world, and it was super traumatic. And that was really, really hard to deal with. The emotional trauma there, the anger at my mom, the trying to protect and respect my partner's feelings over his dog, and my mom's negligence and immaturity was just like, holy crap. And thankfully, I did have a supportive community of friends around us that were like, we're going to help you get your dog safe. My partner's mom took the dog for her recovery after her surgery, like total reconstructive surgery on her legs, so that we could learn how to be parents and have this baby in our house. But it was really, really hard.
So that's intense, because you have this baby, obviously, that you've grown over this course of time, but obviously you have a much longer time and relationship with this animal. And I'm just speaking like, I've had dogs in my life since I was a baby. And I've had a dog get hit by a car, and that was like so tough. But then I'm thinking the joy of bringing a baby home, and then you're so nervous, and then like, oh my God, I'm really concerned about my animal. I can't even imagine.
Yeah. It was the animal, and then that relationship dynamic. And like, my mom and I were fighting back and forth. She didn't see how it was her fault, and she was all hurt that I wouldn't let her boyfriend come to my freaking house, her new boyfriend of 3 weeks. And I'm like, this is my child, my one and only beautiful baby that I'm bringing into this world. No, I don't want your random boyfriend there.
Yeah. Wow. So what was your postpartum experience like? Did you use and utilize herbs to support your recovery? Did you emotionally have some challenges given this particular experience? Like, how did you navigate through that? And that's a lot of elements.
I did use a lot of herbs, and I have an interesting story to share about my daughter and herbs. After she came home, she was about 4 days old, and she was crying for about 4 hours straight. And I'm like, what do? We broke her, or, what's wrong with our baby? And I had a tea blend that I gave plenty of mamas called Peaceful Baby to help calm infants and deal with colic and things like that. And so I gave her a 5 ml syringe of this tea, and she passed out for 10 hours straight. And we were like, did we break the baby?
Did we break her again?
Is she okay? And wow. It's really interesting. She happens to be a very shy person, very reserved, and very hesitant to open up to adults in particular. And it took her about 4 years to open up to my mom, who was trying to be grandma. Like, we had worked through the forgiveness process, my partner and I, and still my daughter was like, nope, I'm not opening up to grandma, which is so fascinating to me. And then, yes, of course, I used tons of herbs in my postpartum healing process, from helping with the scarring and my own emotional support. I definitely used a lot of lemon balm during that time. I love lemon balm for emotional support and knowing that it is safe for breastfeeding and things like that. And then I did use a lot of milky oat tops to support the nerves and to nourish me and my baby, and red raspberry leaf to heal and repair my uterus and everything, and nettles for nourishment. And
these are all in my face, by the way. Like, I'm just like, I'm tasting them as you're saying them. I'm like, oh, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. Isn't it great? So those, I had already had a line of teas that I made for pregnancy and postpartum times. So I had a Milk Ladies tea that would, in all three of these teas, I had a Mommy to Be and the Milk Ladies tea and the Peaceful Baby tea. And there were always three things that I primarily focused on. And one of them being nourishment, because it takes a lot of work to build a human and then to continue to raise that human. The other ones being taste, because if it's gross, Yeah. Nobody wants that stuff. It doesn't have to be torturous, mama. And then nervous system support, because that is a really, really tough job that we're doing. Building a human, raising a human, making all of that happen. And that whole identity transition, I think that was one of the most shocking things for me. Like, I was 34, almost 35 when I had my daughter. Suddenly, I'm now mom. Like, that's a whole new identity.
And what does that even mean, right? Like, what does mom mean, actually?
Who am I now? And what do I do? Like, and, you know, I now work with and know a lot of women that did deal with or are dealing with postpartum depression. And I think I'm really fortunate in that I didn't. And I can't even exactly say why I didn't. Maybe it's because I was so well supported by my partner. Maybe it's because at that point in time, I was able to be home for 2 years straight with my daughter. That's huge. We don't have that for most women. I was so fortunate for that. And I think that's a huge contributor.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, the community piece, you said one word that I think is like the best word as it pertains to postpartum, and that's nourishment. You know, making sure that the food that you're consuming is nutritive, making sure that if you're comfortable with taking herbs, that they are nourishing your cells and everything, like replenishing everything that you need. And I think the quality of our food has decreased so much. The quality of our communities and how we navigate family has decreased so much that we're just like, well, if I ate, that should be good enough. But it's like, is it what you needed? Is it replenishing the nutrients? How is your heart? You know, I can relate, and I don't quite exactly know what it is with the parent thing, but there's a very interesting, I have some theories about how our children are able to receive emotional downloads and information from us in utero, as well as, I mean, probably always, whether we're talking about the things we're struggling with in certain relationships. They are some of the most intuitive beings out there. And they just strictly operate off of it. They don't switch. They don't code switch for anybody. If I don't like you, I don't like you, and that's just that. And so it's interesting. I have one of those. Children, but I have one of those where I'm just like, that's interesting. I kind of like that, though. I appreciate that quality.
Yeah, it took us a while to figure it out, and like, once she opens up to somebody, she is open and ready to go. But ever since she was an infant, you know how people will get together and be like, oh, Gucci baby talk, a little new baby. And, you know, we were a pretty well-known couple in our area. So everybody was so excited for us to have a baby. And we're both pretty loud and boisterous, outgoing people. And I just remember so many people coming to our baby like, oh, and she would just stone cold stare at them like, I ain't falling for your crap. And she's almost 10, and she still does this same thing with people. Like, I see through you. I see your soul, and I am not playing your crap, which was so fascinating. I'm learning a lot right now about the subconscious mind and how it gets pre-programmed and how much of that is impacted, obviously, by our parents and the things that we grew up on, and how the subconscious mind is completely formatted from the ages of 0 to 7, taking in all of this stuff. And now I'm like, I broke her. I really broke her. Oh no,
break her again.
We keep breaking this child. But then I'm like, wait a second, I'm 44, and how many times have I grown and changed? And how many more times will I? And so just teaching her those processes, that she also has the ability to rewire that subconscious brain. And just, maybe that's a bit heavy for her at 9 years old right now, but I'm still teaching it to her and letting her know.
I don't think it's too heavy. I think we do our children a disjustice in that department. I think that obviously we can make it age appropriate in terms of concepts
Right.
and how we share them, but they have such a great capacity for so much more than we give them credit for.
Yeah.
So just giving them the tools. And I think that that's really what parenting is giving them the tools and being that like safe space for them while they figure it out and jump and fall on their face and get back up. You just dust them off and like, okay, try again.
Yeah.
If you, in hindsight, looking at your experience, obviously there were some variables there that you had no control over. What would you do differently?
Maybe I'd put guidelines on my mom ahead of time that there is no way in hell that your boyfriend is coming to my house. That would be the biggest thing. That was really traumatic. What else would I do differently? There's really nothing that I could do differently, honestly. It was all a part of my story and Anira's story and our process. I had the best midwife, naturopath. I had the best support team around me. I didn't have a doula technically, but my partner is so wonderfully supportive and helpful. And gosh, what would I do differently? Yeah,
you don't have to. That's just something I always wonder, because sometimes, even in any story, we don't have as much control as we think we do. We just kind of experience our stories, and so it's just interesting though. When I think the boundaries thing is huge, because I do think it's under mentioned when it comes to how you're preparing for what your support looks like during pregnancy and postpartum. If you don't have healthy boundaries that already exist within your family dynamic, that part could get overlooked until you're like in the thick of things. You're going, oh, wow, I really wish I had a stronger boundary there, or that I would have communicated things differently to avoid A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But yeah, family dynamics are, they're a thing.
That was a really rough time. I just remember, I had this cesarean and my body couldn't do much. And all I really did for the first couple of weeks was sit in a rocker with this new baby and, recognize that I was a new kind of human, and try and fix the emotional damage between my partner and my mother, and try and get my siblings to understand why I was so mad at her. And just that bummer of like, this is my mom.
Yeah.
She done messed up. And I love her. And, we're moms. We all mess up a lot.
All the time. All the time. So in your experience as an herbalist, and now you said you work with a ton of postpartum moms that are experiencing any range of perinatal mood disorder, whether it's anxiety, depression. I'm not sure if you've come across postpartum psychosis, but what would you say to someone who is interested in receiving and vetting herbal support from maybe a local herbalist in their area? What are some things that they should be looking for when it comes to postpartum herbal support?
So, number one, you want to recognize that not every herb is going to be right for you, and think about whether or not you are breastfeeding. So I do recommend working with a trained herbalist or somebody that is very knowledgeable in that department, to make sure that you are getting things that are going to be safe for you and safe for your baby, and that will nourish your body and support the nervous system. Really keeping those things in mind. I think a lot of times people run to the internet and they read one statement from somebody and they're like, great, that's the herb that's going to fix all my problems. And it doesn't work that way. Unfortunately, that's what I like to call, like, one thing I like to shift is that, so many people, it's great, are seeking that natural alternative in this world, but they'll also come to me and say, Mel, what herb can I take to fix all of these things? And I'm like, well, you're asking herbs to be an instant fix pill like pharmaceuticals, and they're not. So really considering that the nourishment, like you mentioned, is really important. All of those vitamins and minerals you can get through a lot of different herbs. And then finding those that support the nerves. Then, there's obviously so many other pieces that come together to make this happen. Like, what are you eating? Are you able to take 3 minutes away from your baby to just breathe? Yeah. Can you find that? That's really important and really hard. It's really hard to do, but it is the foundation of being able to get through that postpartum depression time, and to also recognize that you're not alone. You're not the only one that has been through this, that you will make it through this, that it's okay to ask for help. As a matter of fact, please ask for help. Please ask for help. There are a myriad of herbs that I do like to recommend to moms to at least try a little bit, see how it works with your body. If it works well with your body, great, you can take more. Then maybe bring on the next herb and try it and see how it works with your body and your baby. Pay attention to your baby if you're breastfeeding, because it does go through the breast milk in about 30 minutes. And, if it's great and everybody's happy, then you can keep using that herb. So exploring those.
It sounds like you recommend like isolation testing, where you're doing one at a time and seeing what the results are before you go on to the next one. My other question too, when I think about as it pertains to herbs, I'm not sure how this would work, but are there any sort of like transitional herbs that could be supportive for pregnancy, but kind of keep you level set? And obviously this is something I just want to say, you guys need to get and meet and have your consults with an actual herbalist. But those transitional herbs that can be nutrient dense during pregnancy, very nourishing during pregnancy, help you right at and after birth, and then also possibly be a component of a tea or some other sort of blend that supports you postpartum. Is that a family of herbs that folks can talk and look into?
Yeah, there's definitely quite a few that I recommend, and I've talked about a couple of them already. Nettles for sure is one of our most nutrient-dense herbs and plants out there. The red raspberry leaf, also nutrient-dense and going to strengthen and tone and prep you for labor, and then support the uterus after labor, which is really, really important. I highly recommend something like oat straw in a tea or milky oat tops specifically. They need to be in a tincture form, because unless you're going to eat them in the 7-day window that they are at their prime for harvesting. But the milky oat tops come from the same plant that oatmeal is made from, and they are the little seed pod, and you can squeeze them when they're ripe, and they come out with like this milky substance. And then when you tincture that, it's one of the most nourishing, supportive tonics for the nervous system. So I highly recommend that. And for a lot of people, lemon balm or catnip. Chamomile can be another fantastic one to really work wonders to ease the nerves and be safe for both mama and baby during those times.
I love that. Thank you so much, Mel, for this was a dope conversation. I learned a lot and I laughed a lot. Just, our families aren't as different as we would like to feel that they are. But in these last few moments, I want to give you a chance to share again how people can find you, how they can contact you, what you have going on presently. I know you talked a little bit about the Herbalist Path and some other things that you've done in the past, but how can people find you now, reach out for a consult if they want to, or just get in contact with you?
Yeah, you can reach me at theherbalistpath.com, and I'm at The Herbalist Path on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and all of the places. If you cannot afford the support of a clinical herbalist one-on-one, my Apothecary Mama program is amazing. I do bi-weekly Q&As that are live, and then the other weeks we do deep dive herbal workshops. I bring in guest herbalists and nurses and other practitioners to teach on their specialty, which maybe I want to talk to you about, Jacqueline. For instance, tomorrow, actually, we're having a former ER nurse come on who has done a lot of birth and death work as well, and she's going to talk about postpartum time. So I'm excited to bring her on. So that's a membership I have called Apothecary Mama, and I have for sure put it at a very approachable rate to get that kind of access to knowledge and support. And there's tons of recipes and lessons and all that fun stuff. So
I love that.
Find me there.
I love that. And I really appreciate you sharing your experience today. I think that you highlighted just some areas, right? I think we all have questions sometimes, and we mull over these different scenarios in our mind, and we just need to hear what other people have experienced, just so that we can have some sort of reference point for all the questions in our mind as we're preparing for that season. So thank you again so much for joining us today. We thank everyone for joining in for our Postpartum in the Raw podcast. You can follow us. This is being put on by Okionu, so you guys can follow us and join our community at www.okionu.app. And we appreciate you guys. So have an amazing rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.